Welcome to another edition of Reading with Rockfish. So happy you could join me. It's Sunday morning where I am. Whenever you watch this, it could be different. We're on week 12 or something for stay at home, safer at home, be at home, leave the home. I don't think you should be at home. I think you should be at home. We don't know. Just do what you think is right. Listen to your parents, use your brain, follow the experts. And I know each side has experts. Whatever. Take care of yourself and sit back and enjoy some reading, okay? That's what I'm going to do. Today, I'm going to read 2 fairy tales. I know. Fairy tales. When you think of fairy tales, what do you think of? I think of magical lands and stories for kids. You know, like Cinderella, Jack and the Beanstalk, The Three Little Pigs, Red Riding Hood. We read Red Riding Hood. We read the German version from the Brothers Grimm. Now, today I found the France version, Tales from France. So the French version, Little Red Riding Hood. This time they put little in front of it. Before it was just Red Riding Hood. Come on, let's go look. This is by Charles Perrault. I hope I'm saying his name right. Perrault or Perrault? I can't remember if you pronounce the T or not. So, once upon a time there lived in a certain village a little country girl, the prettiest creature ever seen. They're always pretty, aren't they? Her mother was very fond of her, and her grandmother doted on her still more. Doted means kind of spoiled. This good woman had made her a little Red Riding Hood, which became her so well that everybody called her Little Red Riding Hood. Well, that's how she got her name, same as the other one. You know, Germany, they were making a Red Riding Hood. France, same thing. I digress. Let's go back. One day her mother, having made some custard, said to her, "Go, my dear, and see how thy grandmamma does, for I hear she has been very ill. Carry her a custard and this little pot of butter." In Germany, Grandma got a bottle of wine because she was feeling ill. In France, they go with custard. Little Red Riding Hood set out immediately to go to her grandmother, who lived in another village. Again, gets to go across the village, go out of town, to go see Grandma, all by herself. As she was going through the woods, she met the Gaffer Wolf, who had a very great mind to eat her up. But he durst not, because some workers were working hard in the forest. He asked her whither she was doing. The poor child, who did not know that it was dangerous to stop and listen to a wolf, said to him, remember, don't stop to talk to strangers, "I am going to see my grandmamma and carry her a custard and a little pot of butter from my mamma." "Does she live far off?" said the wolf. "Oh, yes," answered Little Red Riding Hood. "It is beyond that mill you see there, at the first house in the village." "Here, stop right here. Never tell a stranger where you're going, okay? Danger, danger. Back in the day, it was dangerous too. So don't let people tell you, when I was a kid, things were safe. Not in Little Red's time, because there was a wolf in the woods." "Well," said the wolf, "I'll go and see her too. I'll go this way and you go that, and we shall see who will be the soonest. Who will be there soonest." Oh, so now he's got a race. The wolf began to run as fast as he could, taking the nearest way, and the little girl went by the longest, diverting herself in gathering nuts, running after butterflies, and making nosegays of such little flowers as she met with. In Germany, she was just picking flowers and got distracted. In France, she's doing all sorts of things, chasing butterflies, picking flowers. The wolf was not long before he got to the old woman's house. He knocked at the door. Tap, tap. "Who's there?" "Your grandchild, Little Red Riding Hood," replied the wolf. "Liar!" imitating her voice. "Who has brought you a custard and a little pot of butter sent you by mamma?" The good grandmother, who was in bed because she was ill, cried out, "Pull the bobbin and the latch will go up." The wolf pulled the bobbin. You know, it's like a hook, so that the latch on the door goes up, and the door opened, and he fell upon the good woman and ate her up in a moment, for it was above 3 days that he had not touched a bit. Well, the wolf hadn't eaten in 3 days. He's hungry. He then shut the door and went into the grandmother's bed, expecting Little Red Riding Hood, who came in some time afterward and knocked at the door. Tap, tap, tap. "Who's there?" Little Red Riding Hood, hearing the big voice of the wolf, was at first afraid. Oops, I should read it then this way. Who's there? But believing her grandmother had a cold, who's there? And the hoarse voice was hoarse, answered, "'Tis your little grandchild, Little Red Riding Hood, who has brought you a custard and a pot of butter from mamma." The wolf cried out to her, softening his voice as much as he could. He's no dummy. "Pull the bobbin and the latch will go up." Little Red Riding Hood pulled the bobbin and the door opened. The wolf, seeing her come in, said to her, hiding himself under the bedclothes, Put the custard and the little pot of butter upon the stool and come lie down with me." "Don't do it, Red, don't!" Little Red Riding Hood undressed herself and stood by the bed where, being greatly amazed to see how her grandmother looked in her nightclothes, said to her, "Grandmother, what great arms you've got!" "That is better to hug you with, my dear." "Grandmamma, what great legs you've got!" "The better to run, my child." "Grandmamma, what great ears you've got!" "The better to hear you, my child." "Grandma, what great eyes you've got!" "The better to see you, my child." "Grandmamma, what great teeth you have!" "To eat thee up." And saying these words, the wicked wolf fell upon Little Red Riding Hood and ate her all up. What? That is not a happy story. Grandmama, dead. Little Red, dead. Wolf, sated. Full. Very happy. Now, that's what France's version. Germany, at least they got out. I mean, come on. These are supposed to be kids' stories. What are they thinking? Well, maybe the British are better. Come on. Have you ever heard of the story of Mr. Miacca? I hadn't either. It's a tale. It's famous. Jacob, what's his name now? Author Joseph Jacobs. He's collected English fairy tales, and the stories were both be enchanting and teach a lesson. I'm going to tell you, this man's got some twisted lessons in here. Okay? Now, I don't know if we can get through it. Maybe. Let's go. Tommy Grimes was sometimes a good boy and sometimes a bad boy. Well, they're all a little like that, aren't they? And when he was a bad boy, he was very bad boy. Now, his mother used to say to him, Tommy, Tommy, be a good boy and don't go out of the street, or else Mr. Miacca will take you. Stalkers way back in the day. And don't go out of the street, or else Mr. Miacca will take you. But still, when he was a bad boy, he could go out of the street, and one day, sure enough, he had scarcely gone around the corner when Mr. Miacca did catch him and popped him into a bag upside down and took him off to his house. Kidnapped back in the day in merry old England. When Mr. Miacca got Tommy inside, he pulled him out of the bag and sat him down and felt his arms and legs. You're rather tough, he said, but you're all I've got for supper, and you'll not taste bad after I've boiled you. But bottle me, I forgot the herbs, and it's bitter you'll taste without herbs. Sally! Here, I say, Sally! And he called to Mrs. Miacca. Mrs. Miacca's in on this. So Mrs. Miacca came out of another room and said, What do you want, my dear? Oh, here's a little boy for supper, said Mr. Miacca, and I forgot the herbs. Mind him, will ya, while I go for him. All right, my love, said Mrs. Miacca, and off he goes. So Mrs. Miacca never stops and says, Hey, where'd you get the kid from? No, she's just like, okay, go get some herbs. They don't have Amazon, so they got to go out and get their own stuff. All right, my love, said Mrs. Miacca, and off he goes. Then Tommy Grimes said to Mrs. Miacca, Does Mr. Miacca always have little boys for dinner? Mostly, my dear, said Mrs. Miacca, if little boys are bad enough and get in his way. And don't you have anything else but boy meat? Don't you want anything else? No pudding? Asked Tommy. I loves pudding, said Mrs. Miacca, but it's not often that the likes of me gets pudding. "Why, my mother is making a pudding this very day," said Tommy Grimes, "and I'm sure she'd give you some if I ask her." Tommy's thinking, "Shall I run and get some?" "Now, that's a thoughtful boy," said Mrs. Miacca. "Only don't be long and be sure to be back for supper." Stop right there. Mrs. Miacca, is she dense? You just let your dinner run away. Think he's going to come back? Let's find out. This is the only illustration, so you know that looks a little bad. So off Tommy pelted, and right glad as he was off, I messed up on that, sorry. So off Tommy pelted, and right glad he was to get off so cheap. And for many a long day he was good as good could be, and never went around the corner. But he couldn't always be good. I mean, how many of us can always be good? Not me. I try, but I can't be. Okay. And one day he went around the corner, and as luck would have it, he hadn't scarcely rounded it when Mr. Miacca snatched him up and popped him in his bag and took him home. When he got him there, Mr. Miacca dropped him out, and when he saw him, he said, "Ah, you're the youngster that served me and my missus such a shabby trick, leaving us without supper. Well, you shan't do it again. I'll watch over you myself. Here, get under the sofa, and I'll set on it, and I'll watch the pot boil for you." So poor Tommy Grimes had to creep under the sofa, and Mr. Miacca sat on it and waited for the pot to boil. Picture this in your mind. Mr. Miacca on the couch. Tommy underneath the couch. Mr. Miacca sitting on top of him. Ha ha! Scary. This isn't a fairy tale, it's a horror story. Or is it? So poor Tommy Grimes had to creep under the sofa, and Mr. Miacca sat on it and waited for the pot to boil, and they waited and they waited. But still the pot didn't boil, till at last Mr. Miacca got tired of waiting and said, "Here, you under there, I'm not going to wait any longer. Put your leg, and I'll stop you. You're giving us the slip." What? "I'm not going to wait any longer. Put out your leg." Oh, I misspoke. "Put out your leg, and I'll stop you. You're giving us the slip." Well, what is he going to do with the leg? So Tommy put out a leg, and Mr. Miacca got a chopper and chopped it off and pops it into the pot. Oh, poor Tommy. Suddenly he calls out, "Sally, my dear Sally," and nobody answered. So he went into the next room to look out for Mrs. Miacca. And while he was there, Tommy crept out from under the sofa and ran out the door. Oh, how did he get out there? For it was the leg of the sofa that he had put out. So Tommy Grimes ran home, and he never went around the corner again till he was old enough to go alone. Oh, that's kind of a horror story. I mean, good thinking, Tommy. Mr. Miacca, bad. It's more like a James Patterson meets fairy tale meets freaky deaky. This is like Stephen King and James Patterson get together and they make a hybrid fairy tale, but it's not really. So, Mr. Miacca, I wanted to read these. I got these books to read to my grandson, but I told my daughter about it, and she's like, "No, you're not reading that to my son." But I like the story. So, Mr. Miacca, not really a fairy tale, but they say it was. So back in the day, when people tell you things are better back in the day, are they really? Maybe. They're just pulling your leg. Not your real leg, maybe the proverbial leg. Or maybe we just like to say scary things to kids. I don't know. But I'm so glad you joined me. Talk it over. You could tell other people about Red Riding Hood, the French version and the German version. And then compare it to the Disney version. Okay? Whatever you do, have fun, enjoy life, get outside and play. Don't go around the corner because Mr. Miacca could come. And don't wander off like Little Red. The moral of the story is, stay where your family knows you are. But have fun. Okay? Thanks for joining me. Peace, friends.